The Grand Canyon is America's monument to eternity, a mile deep, 270 miles long, walls of stone carved by time itself, older than memory, older than history. By day, it is awe. Tourists stare into its vast silence, feeling small against the horizon. But when the sun sets, the canyon changes. Its silence is no longer peaceful. It is oppressive, endless, alive. For every postcard view, there are places the park rangers warn you not to go, places where maps end, where radios go silent, and where hikers vanish without a trace. Caves that were sealed for reasons no one will explain. Legends buried under centuries of rock. Stories whispered by guides about ghosts that still walk the trails. This is not just a canyon. It is a labyrinth, and inside it are mysteries so disturbing that even in the open desert, you'll feel the walls closing in. Lock your doors, put on your headphones, because after this video, you'll never see the Grand Canyon the same way again. The missing hikers of the Grand Canyon's death zone, ongoing. Every year, millions of people step to the edge of the Grand Canyon. They take photos, they hike the trails, they trust the maps, the signs, the guardrails. But hidden in those miles of rock and desert are places the rangers whisper about, zones where rescue is nearly impossible and where far too many hikers never return. The Grand Canyon has seen hundreds of disappearances, but some stand apart. These are not tourists slipping on a ledge, not hikers collapsing from heat. These are men and women who walked into the canyon and simply vanished, their bodies never found, their last steps swallowed by silence. One of the most infamous cases is David "Gabe" Gonzalez, a fit, experienced hiker who set out alone in 1982. His car was found at the South Rim, his gear still packed. Rangers searched for weeks, combing trails and riverbanks. Nothing. To this day, no trace has ever been recovered. Then there is Morgan Heimer, a 22-year-old river guide who vanished in June 2015. He was leading a rafting expedition on the Colorado River, near Pumpkin Springs, when he was last seen standing at the water's edge. Minutes later, he was gone. His group searched frantically. Rangers scoured the area with helicopters, divers, and drones. But Morgan had disappeared, as though the canyon itself had opened and taken him. Rangers have a name for these places: the death zones, areas where heat soars above 110 degrees, where shade is scarce, where trails twist into unmarked canyons. Even with GPS, signals fade, radios fail, and if someone collapses or takes a wrong turn, the chances of survival shrink to minutes. But what makes these disappearances disturbing is not just the number, it's the absence of evidence. No gear, no bones, no clothing. As if the canyon does not just kill, it erases. Locals whisper about the vanishing trails, places where maps don't align with the land, where compasses spin uselessly. Others believe the Colorado River itself holds the answers, its currents dragging bodies into submerged caves and keeping them there, preserved in the dark. Some speak of old mines and sealed tunnels along the canyon walls, places where you could hide anything, even a body, and no one would ever know. For the families, there is no closure, only the endless horizon of the canyon, beautiful and merciless. They come back year after year, staring into the abyss, hoping for something, anything, that will tell them what happened. Stand at the rim at dusk, and the silence presses close. The wind rises from the depths like breath from something unseen. You realize why rangers call them the death zones. The canyon does not give back what it takes. The missing hikers are not numbers. They are warnings, proof that in a place this vast even daylight cannot save you from disappearing. And if entire hikers can vanish into silence, what about civilizations? The canyon's walls hold caves carved by the Anasazi, and some believe those caves tell the story of whole tribes that vanished, leaving behind only bones and unanswered questions. The Anasazi Caves and Vanishing Tribes, Grand Canyon centuries ago. Long before tourists set foot on the canyon's trails, before rangers and maps and guided tours, the Grand Canyon belonged to others. Tribes like the Hopi, Zuni, Paiute, and Navajo have called this land sacred for centuries. And even older still were the ancestral Puebloans, often called the Anasazi. They built dwellings in cliffs, carved petroglyphs into stone, and left behind signs of a complex life. Then they disappeared. Entire communities vanished, their dwellings abandoned, their stories swallowed by time. The Grand Canyon holds fragments of this mystery in its caves. Hidden chambers with pottery, tools, and murals have been found over the years, some depicting strange figures, part human, part animal, part something else. Archaeologists still debate what these images mean. To many, they look like records of encounters we cannot explain. In 1909, the Arizona Gazette published a story that electrified readers. It claimed an explorer named G.E. Kincaid had stumbled into a massive underground city hidden in the canyon walls. Inside, he reported chambers filled with artifacts, statues, hieroglyphs, even mummies that resembled ancient Egyptian culture more than anything native to America. The Smithsonian, the article claimed, sealed off the site and denied its existence. To this day, no evidence of Kincaid's discovery has ever resurfaced. Many dismiss it as a hoax, but others point out, why did the Gazette run the story at all? And why did the Smithsonian react with silence instead of explanation? Local tribes have their own warnings. The Hopi speak of Sipapuni, a sacred opening in the earth said to be the doorway from which their ancestors emerged into this world. They also warn of caves that should never be entered, places that belong to spirits, not the living. Modern explorers who have ventured into unmarked caves report feelings of dread, of being watched, of sudden illness that forces them out. Some claim to have found sealed entrances, reinforced with stone and concrete, as if deliberately hidden. The unanswered question remains, what happened to the Anasazi? Drought and famine are the official answers, but the complete abandonment of entire communities still puzzles historians. And in the Grand Canyon, the caves seem to whisper of something more, a migration into the earth itself, or into places we were never meant to see. Stand at the base of those cliffs, where ancient steps cut into stone still lead upward to nowhere. The air is still, the walls pressing in. You can almost hear the voices of a people who vanished without trace. A silence as vast as the canyon itself. The Anasazi caves are not just ruins, they are reminders that the Grand Canyon has swallowed entire civilizations before, and it may do so again. And if whole tribes could vanish into the canyon's caves, what chance did one man have in 1993? An expert river guide who stepped into its waters and was never seen again. The disappearance of John Daggett, Grand Canyon, 1993. By the early 1990s, John Daggett was no stranger to the Grand Canyon. He was a river guide, the kind of man tourists trusted with their lives as rafts cut through the violent waters of the Colorado River. Friends described him as careful, methodical, and at home in the canyon's shadows. But in June of 1993, John Daggett vanished into those same waters, and what makes his story so disturbing is how impossible it should have been. Daggett was leading a rafting trip with a small group of adventurers. They had camped the night before near one of the canyon's quieter bends, and by morning, he was preparing gear by the water's edge. Witnesses remember him stepping aside, pacing near the shoreline. Then, in a moment that no one fully saw, he was gone. At first, the group thought he had slipped into the river, but Daggett was an expert swimmer, trained in the canyon's currents, always wearing proper gear. The water was calm. No splash was heard. No cry for help. Within seconds, he had vanished completely. The group called for rangers. Helicopters swept the area. Rescue boats scoured the river downstream. Divers searched the depths. Nothing. Not a shoe, not a piece of clothing, not a fragment of equipment. The search stretched for weeks, covering miles of river, and turned up nothing. Colleagues were stunned. Daggett was the kind of man who respected the river. He didn't take reckless chances, didn't wander far from camp, didn't ignore safety. For him to vanish silently in front of others defied everything they knew. Theories formed. Some believed he slipped into a hidden current, pulled into an underwater cave that swallowed his body. Others suggested he walked off deliberately, that the canyon had become too heavy a weight. But those who knew him rejected that. They believed something else had happened, something no one could explain. What made the case worse for investigators was the absolute lack of evidence. Most drowning victims eventually resurface. Bodies are carried downstream, belongings wash up. But John Daggett left nothing. It was as if the canyon itself had closed over him, keeping him forever. For his fellow guides, the disappearance became a legend, whispered on long rafting trips at night. They say the canyon chose him, that certain places along the river are not just dangerous, but hungry. Some even warn new guides, never wander alone at dusk because the canyon keeps what it wants. Stand on the riverbank today where Daggett was last seen, and the silence presses in. The water flows smooth and calm, betraying nothing. But if you stare too long, you feel it. The weight of a man who vanished into the open without a trace in front of witnesses who could do nothing but watch. The disappearance of John Daggett remains unsolved. His body never found. His story, a warning whispered by guides who still run the river. And if a modern river guide could vanish in calm waters, what about the explorers of 1909, who claimed to find entire underground chambers of mummies and artifacts before the government sealed the cave and erased the discovery? The Kincaid Cave controversy, Grand Canyon. On April 5, 1909, the Arizona Gazette ran a front-page story that has haunted the Grand Canyon ever since. It told of an explorer named G.E. Kincaid, who claimed to have discovered a vast underground chamber high in the canyon walls. What he described was not just a cave, but a buried city. According to Kincaid, the entrance was hidden nearly 2,000 feet above the river. Inside, he said, were passageways stretching for hundreds of yards. Rooms carved into the stone held artifacts that looked nothing like Native American tools, copper weapons, stone tablets covered in strange symbols, even statues with features resembling those of ancient Egypt or Asia. He wrote of a central chamber where dozens of mummified bodies sat cross-legged as though in eternal meditation. The Gazette reported that the discovery was being examined by the Smithsonian Institution, which supposedly sent a team to investigate, but no official report was ever published. In fact, the Smithsonian later denied any involvement, insisting no such cave existed. To this day, the institution has no record of Kincaid, no artifacts, nothing. So what happened? Was it a hoax? An elaborate tale meant to sell papers in an age when lost civilizations fascinated the public? Or was something truly found in the canyon and deliberately hidden? Hikers and explorers who have searched the canyon for the supposed cave claim certain areas have been quietly sealed. Heavy stonework blocks some entrances, as if to keep people out. Rangers dismiss these claims, saying caves are closed only for safety, yet the rumors persist. What makes the controversy so persistent is how carefully the Gazette story was written. It was not styled as a tall tale. It gave specific measurements, descriptions, even supposed interviews with Smithsonian representatives, and it appeared not in a fringe paper, but in one of Arizona's leading publications. Local tribes have long spoken of forbidden places in the canyon, caves that lead into the earth, chambers where spirits dwell, doors that should never be opened. The Hopi in particular described the canyon as a place of emergence and return, a threshold between worlds. Some believe Kincaid stumbled into one of those forbidden spaces and that it was sealed not for science, but for something deeper. Stand along the sheer cliffs where the Colorado cuts through stone, and you see countless dark openings in the rock. Caves no one enters, shadows that hide what lies within. Could one of them still hold the chambers Kincaid described? Or did someone make sure that secret was buried forever? The Kincaid Cave controversy remains one of the canyon's greatest unsolved mysteries, too detailed to dismiss, too strange to explain, and too persistent to forget. And if a cave could hide mummies and lost civilizations, what about the places tourists still visit today, like Phantom Ranch, where rangers and guests whisper about a figure that walks the trails at night, long after death? The Phantom Ranch Ghost Stories, Grand Canyon, 20th century, present. Deep inside the Grand Canyon, where the Bright Angel Trail meets the Colorado River, sits Phantom Ranch. To most, it is a rare comfort in the wilderness, a cluster of cabins, a canteen, a place where weary hikers and rafters can sleep in a real bed before braving the canyon again. But to those who have worked there, and those who have stayed overnight, Phantom Ranch is more than a rest stop. It is a place where the dead do not stay quiet. The stories stretch back decades. Rangers whisper about guests who wake in the night to see a figure standing at the foot of their beds, silent, unmoving, watching. Others have heard boots pacing outside their cabins long after curfew, only to open the door to empty paths. One of the oldest tales speaks of a worker who hanged himself near the ranch in the 1920s when the lodge was first built. Some say he still walks the grounds, Guests have reported hearing a man's voice calling from the shadows or seeing a figure in work clothes vanish into the dark. But the strangest accounts come from rangers themselves. One described locking up the canteen late at night and hearing laughter behind him. Low, guttural, inhuman. When he turned, no one was there. Another told of radios crackling with static whenever he passed a certain stretch of trail, followed by the distinct sound of footsteps pacing in time with his own. Hikers, too, bring back their own stories. One woman swore she saw a lantern bobbing along the trail above the ranch, yet no night hikes were allowed, and no one ever appeared. Another group said they heard screams echoing from the cliffs at 2 a.m., screams that stopped all at once, as if swallowed by the canyon itself. The stories might be dismissed as exhaustion, dehydration, the tricks of a restless mind, but what makes them harder to ignore is their consistency. Year after year, generation after generation, Phantom Ranch staff record the same encounters, the same figure, the same footsteps, the same cold silence pressing into the night. Even the name carries weight. Locals say Phantom Ranch was not chosen lightly. It was a warning, a recognition that the canyon holds not just rock and river, but echoes of those who never made it out. Spend one night at Phantom Ranch, and the canyon feels different. The walls close in, the silence deepens, and when the footsteps start outside your cabin, you will understand why rangers never laugh off the stories. The Phantom Ranch is not just a place to rest. It is a reminder. The canyon does not always let go of those who enter. And if ghosts still walk the ranch in plain sight, what hope did Chris Fowler have in 2016 when he set out alone along the canyon's trail system, smiling in the last photograph ever taken of him before vanishing forever? The disappearance of Chris Fowler, Grand Canyon 2016. In the fall of 2016, Chris Fowler, known to friends as Sherpa, was living a dream. At 34 years old, he was hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, a grueling 2,600-mile trek that winds from Mexico to Canada. Friends say he thrived outdoors, documenting his journey in photographs, smiling beneath his wide-brimmed hat. But as the trail carried him toward the Grand Canyon's vast system of crossings and feeder routes, his dream abruptly ended. Chris was last seen on October 12th, near White Pass in Washington, continuing a stretch that connects into canyon country. Other hikers remembered him as cheerful, moving at a steady pace. Someone even snapped a photo of him that morning, standing by the trail, alive and well. Hours later, he was gone. Search teams mobilized quickly. Rangers, volunteers, helicopters, and dogs scoured miles of trail and side canyons. Flyers were posted, calls sent across state lines. Nothing. No gear, no clothing, no trace. The only thing left behind was that final photograph, a smiling man on the edge of one of America's wildest landscapes. What makes his disappearance so chilling is the environment itself. The Grand Canyon's trail systems are deceptive. Vast networks of switchbacks, side paths, and false markers that can swallow hikers in minutes. Even seasoned outdoorsmen lose their bearings. Add sudden weather shifts, treacherous drops, and the canyon's ability to silence shouts within seconds, and you understand why searches often end empty. But for Chris, the silence is absolute. Years have passed, and still no trace has surfaced. His family continues to search, organizing expeditions and urging anyone who hikes the canyon to keep their eyes open. Online forums light up with theories. Did he fall into the Colorado River? Was he caught in a storm? Did he choose to vanish? But none explain the absence of evidence. None account for how a man could step off a trail in daylight and simply cease to exist. The last photo of Chris Fowler is haunting. A smiling face, a journey nearly complete, and then a void. A reminder that in the canyon, even the most experienced can be erased without warning. Stand on those trails today, and you feel the weight of it. The endless switchbacks, the shadows between cliffs, the silence waiting to close in. You realize Chris Fowler is not alone. He is one of many who entered the canyon and never returned. The disappearance of Chris Fowler is not just a tragedy. It is proof that the Grand Canyon does not care for dreams or journeys or promises. It keeps what it takes, leaving only silence behind. 6 mysteries, 6 reasons to fear what the canyon hides. The hikers swallowed by death zones, the caves of the vanished Anasazi, the river guide who disappeared in calm water, the caverns sealed by silence and denial, the ranch where footsteps walk long after midnight, and a modern hiker whose smile was the last anyone would ever see. The Grand Canyon is not just a wonder of the world. It is a monument to the unexplained, a place where the earth itself decides what truths will never surface. Tell us, which mystery haunted you most? And where should we look next? But be careful what you ask for, because in America's wilderness, some places are already watching.